think.
That was the exact right recommendation. Okay. Okay, well, so we're going to do 4 sessions today. We're going to do what is a ROC and multi-million-dollar corporation session, don't reinvent the wheel session, and Molly will do her financial review. So let's just dig right in and start with that first, what is a ROC? Molly, can you share that PowerPoint?
Here I go. You seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, we already done all that.
Yeah. So hopefully, I think this will be good review for everybody. So let's next slide, please.
Oh, this is all the different sessions.
These are the sessions, and so we'll get into we'll do some meeting facilitation stuff and parliamentary procedure stuff, like things around meetings today. And hopefully it'll be some good takeaways, or there'll be 1 or 2 things that you haven't seen before. So let's keep going, or maybe it's good review. So so let's go back and let's whiteboard. All right. So I'm going to put the view on my view. I want to see everybody side by side gallery. Okay. So most of the ROCs in New York do not seem to need ground rules for their meetings. Although sometimes a lot of members show up and things have gotten a little gnarly, but what I've seen, many of the ROCs need ground rules for annual meetings. Do you guys use ground rules for annual meetings? Has that ever come up as a necessity or a good practice that you use? You want to go? No. Okay, so let's do this. Let's come up with good ground rules for a productive meeting. So Molly's going to write down any thoughts you have. You can shout them out, or you can write them down in chat. What are some good rules for a productive meeting? Something that you can put on a big piece of paper in the front of the meeting that will enable you to deal with anybody in the group that kind of starts to violate a rule. And then you don't have to be the bad guy. You can just point to the list of rules and say, well, just a reminder, stick to the minutes. There you go. There's
Are
one.
you talking about regular meetings?
Yes.
Monthly meetings? Oh, yeah, we have ground rules for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're specific, and Angela and Doug are aware. We agendize everything. That keeps that keeps everything in order.
Okay.
And if someone brings up something that is off the topic, it's either tabled for the next meeting because it wasn't on the agenda, or there will be a time after before, if there's an executive session, but after the adjournment, there's a time for the folks in the crowd to speak. So we stick strictly to the agenda for a board meeting.
Yeah, and that I've seen things get dicey when boards have people in the room and members start to just chime in, and then you can go off the rails, and it's harder to facilitate. The board covers the agenda first with no comment at the conclusion of the agenda. Yes, you open. I was on a board where we thought it would be best to do an open member open forum at the beginning so that we didn't make people sit through the whole meeting. And there was a lot of folks who then had their say and then left, and a lot of folks who stayed. And you can do it either way. There's good rules about turn your cell phones off. I don't know if you guys have ever been in meetings where like one person dominates, but so another rule that would be good that I've seen groups use to good effect is step up, step back. So if you're a shy person, feel free to be invited to step forward and share what you're thinking. And if you're someone who talks a lot, please remind yourself to give somebody else a chance to speak. It's never hurtful to remind people to be civil. So, it's okay to disagree. It's not okay to be disagreeable. I've written that on, dozens of flip charts in my lifetime in the beginning of meetings. And I've had to point to that many times. So these are some examples of rules. And so can you think of any other things to add to this? So let's go to the next slide. And this is like a, and up it comes. Raise, oh yeah, and then one person at a time, raise hands is something that you could keep up there. And so ground rules are a useful tool. And then Ron alluded to the parking lot, and let's keep it moving. Next slide, please. Now let's do another whiteboard. We've all lived long enough to be in bad meetings. And luckily, I assume we've all been in good meetings as well. So let's come up with a list of what makes a meeting a good meeting and what makes a meeting a bad meeting.
I think we covered a lot of that already.
So good meeting stays on the agenda.
Good meeting stays on the agenda, gives everyone a vote or a say. The one thing that we've discussed, whether there was going to be a discussion for people to talk before or afterwards. But a lot of times you get someone who will, if it were in the beginning, this happened before I was on the board, but they would say their piece, there would be a little tiff, and then people would leave upset.
Mm-hmm.
Or if someone is sitting in through a board meeting and then it comes up, they've got something important that they want to be there. It isn't like they can hit and run.
Could you say more about the tiff thing? So in a bad meeting, someone would, are you saying like drop a bomb and then split? Yeah, so not sticking. So what makes a bad meeting is a hit and run?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we tried to either anticipate or alleviate, just to move away from it. A bad meeting and conversely is not allowing people to say what they think.
And Angela is adding in the chat that naming people, like naming names rather than talking about issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's Sherry. Okay.
Oh, that's
I was
Sherry.
noticing Angela being like, okay.
Hi, Sherry.
Okay, so like stuff that's supposed to be an executive session, you name
Right.
Sherry in open session. So like confidential info. Ooh.
Oh, yeah, Gossip Man. Okay, this is good. Any other final thoughts? We've all been here. And it's when it goes well, it feels so good. And when it goes bad, I've literally lost sleep at night. Okay. Yeah, Molly, if you can take us back.
Oh, I'm supposed to do it there.
Oh, well.
That would have been
anyway.
easier. Oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's what ROC USA. So this guy, I'm going to just play act this, and this is a tip. There's a video here. Maybe you've seen this before, but if you've ever been in a meeting where somebody is dominating and everyone is rolling their eyes, this fellow does an example of how to deal with it. And the effective technique goes like this, and I'll play act it. I'll role play it. Okay, Morris, thank you for sharing that. What I hear you saying is you're very concerned about that all the sheds in our community should be purple. And so what I hear you saying is you'd like to see a proposal for painting all the sheds purple. And so I'm going to put that up on this flip chart. So you also mentioned you're upset at your neighbor's shed, but okay, what I'm hearing in terms of a proposal is painting sheds purple. Thank you. Did I capture everything that you wanted to say? Yes? Great. Now let's go around and other people can comment. We'll go do a go around and we'll comment. People can say what they think about purple sheds and seen. And so that's a technique that you can use if someone's just chewing up the oxygen in the room. They need to be heard. So what the gift you can give them is to make them feel like they've legitimately hear them and honor what they're saying. But you're not obligated to let them go on and repeat themselves. So you don't have to do that. And if you're facilitating the meeting, you can interrupt people. And so hopefully that helps. So let's keep, any questions about that? Yeah, oh, and that's the phrase I was looking for, validate. People want to be validated. And so it never hurts to validate people's feelings, even if they are driving you nuts. We're adults and we can take a deep breath and give people what they need. So let's keep going. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so parliamentary procedure. And so we're cruising towards the end here. Yeah, we should be done with this section. There are, 6 reasons why parliamentary procedure is a good idea. Next slide, please. And so I've seen you guys, your ROCs are using this motion, second, discuss, and decide model. So next slide, please. And your ROCs are also using this flow chart for agendas. Next slide, please. One thing that might not be obvious to everybody is when you do have an open discussion on an issue. So like the other day at Lakeville, there was a discussion about skunks. So and what I saw was that it roughly followed this graphic picture in that you open up the discussion. There's a kind of like an idea. There's a part of the discussion where you're not sure where everyone is going, and you're not. It's called the groan zone, and you're not sure that we're going to come to an actual proposal. And then hopefully somebody makes a proposal. Other people can come in. The job of the facilitator in this particular situation is to try to integrate different proposals there's something called a friendly amendment. So if someone makes a proposal, you can, as a facilitator, ask them, well, will you accept this friendly amendment from someone over here who has said something to that? And then secretary will read the proposal, and then you can vote. And so hopefully you can come out of that groan zone with consensus, or at least a majority opinion on where things should go next. All right, next slide, please. And then I just want to add 3 tools that you can use. So you can, in the case of the purple sheds, you can do a go around. So you always have the option to invite everybody at the table to just go around the horn and say how they feel. That's number 1. Number 2, you can do a straw poll without getting to a vote. People can talk and talk and talk, and you're not sure if you're getting to if you're ready for a vote, but you can do an informal vote that doesn't count and is not reflected in the minutes. And then finally, you always can feel free to delegate a committee to take on the issue. If it doesn't look like something is going to happen, or it's going to take too much time to formulate a proposal, you can create a committee to do that. All right, next slide, please. And so finally, then, board meetings can, they don't have to, but if you'd like to use this form, you can. I've been on boards that have used this form, and you can, it's like choreography in a play. So who's going to be introducing the issue? What material should the board be looking at? And what is it? Is it a vote, a report, an update, or is it an open discussion? And that's basically what you do at meetings. And next slide, please. And let's skip this. Okay, so, oh, we are ahead of time. No, we're not ahead of time. Are we?
A little bit.
Little bit. Good. Any thoughts or
and John, if I could just interject there, being ahead of time is good.
I take that comment. All right. All right. So any questions about kind of like the internal workings of a meeting and parliamentary procedure? Oh, I didn't share this. You all have this, right? I gave that out. And everybody should have a copy of this. Okay. And this is easy to read. This is an interesting reference when you get stumped. So it might be good to bring to a meeting if there's ever, some smoke about issues in terms of procedures. Okay, let us go to the second module. And I'll share that. And I'm going to pass it to Molly.
Okay. Great. Hi, everybody. I think I know all of you, although I'll just reintroduce myself. My name is Molly. I work as a consultant working with ROCs throughout the country, but I got my start in New York, so you guys will always be my favorite. And I'm recovering from COVID, so I apologize if I sound a little bit gross.
Hope you feel better.
I am feeling much better. Thank you, Ron. When John and I were planning this on Thursday, I was not sure that I was going to be able to be vertical for this, but here we are. So this is good. This is good. So the framing of this session is this question of how many of you have run a multi-million-dollar corporation before, and Angela has, and so has Ron, which is, this is a ROC USA training in a way, I think, kind of taking the wind out of the sails of this training. But that's a good thing because I think that really this question is meant to inspire you to sort of the gravity of the responsibility that you're taking on. Because I think oftentimes what I hear from a lot of folks is like, well, I'm on the board, nobody else wants to do this job, or blah, blah, blah. You know, there's some consternation in that direction. And so it kind of feels like, well, I'm just doing this just because, right? But in reality, you have a lot of responsibility. And as Spider-Man's stepfather, whoever that guy was, uncle said, with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. So that is you guys. So John, we can go to the next slide. And yeah. So we'll be talking about what kind of legal responsibilities you all actually take on when you sign on as directors of your own multi-million-dollar corporations, which are your cooperatives, and how you uphold your duty of care and duty of loyalty. Raise your hand if you've ever heard those phrases before, like fiduciary duty, stuff like that. Sounds familiar-ish, hopefully. And then we'll take a quick look at the documents that help you make decisions, because obviously you're not making these decisions or making, you know, these choices in a vacuum. A lot of the decisions, I like to think of your governing documents as sort of like pre-made decisions that you can keep going back to. So you're standing on the shoulders of folks who've come before you and work that's already been done. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel there. So we can go to the next slide, John. And now it's time to whiteboard. I think there actually is a blank slide for this, John, that you can just annotate rather than, yeah, because I was changing the sharing and it was like a whole thing. So, oh, did it not work? You can also just use the whiteboard on the, so the question that we're going to be talking about is, does anybody have anyone on the board, any director or officer have any more power than anybody else? That's sort of my initial question. Any thoughts about that? Angela's shaking her head. No.
Yeah, no, that's why it's a board.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. If it were, you know, if the president had all, because originally the question, which John and I both nixed, is like, what can the president do that nobody else can? But that's a trick question, right? Because as a board, you make decisions together.
The trick question was, oh, never mind, I can't remember now. Something else.
Although there are a few things that are in the president's job description, not that they can do that nobody else can do, but they can do. Can anyone think of those things? They're in the bylaws usually. Normally the president can call a meeting, like they can say, okay, we're having a meeting on this date. Although most boards I work with sort of collectively decide that, if only for scheduling purposes, right? And then they can set the agenda. But at the beginning of most meetings too, there's a chance for everyone to say like, okay, do you have anything to add to the agenda, right? So, sorry to make you go through all that whiteboard process, John, because they got the answer right away. So we can go to the next slide. You can see that like we've tried to make these like interactive, but sometimes it just feels a little clunky. That's okay, we'll get there. So you have two main responsibilities as a board member, like two big picture responsibilities. And you wear lots of hats, right? I think we talk about the hats later on in this presentation, but your two critical responsibilities are your duty of loyalty and your duty of care, right? So as a board member, you are entrusted by your fellow members of your cooperative and your neighbors to manage the affairs of the ROC fairly, in good faith, and responsibly. So this includes managing the money, which we'll get into a little bit later. And this is called fiduciary responsibility, right? So you have to make sure you're making decisions based on what is best for your cooperative, rather than what might be best for you, or even like any one faction of the membership that you might agree with, or your neighbor or your uncle or whoever. So let's take a closer look. So duty of care is that you have to exercise a standard of care that would be exercised by a reasonably prudent person. So that sounds very vague, but it's actually illegal. It's a legal descriptor. And you have to basically do the best you can with what you have. John, did you want to add something?
I do. So this is actually something that could come up in a court case. So as board members, you're protected, you've got board insurance, but you could get sued. And if you can show that you were prudent and did what a reasonable person would do, your decision could have ultimately been a bad decision. But if the board can show in the minutes that it's had taken some time to assess things and do what a reasonable person would do in a prudent fashion, then you have protected yourself. And so it's important to keep that in mind.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't have to be right. You just have to be reasonable is the standard that we're setting here. So another piece of that is that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So you're not required to be lawyers, just like the treasurer isn't required to be a CPA or something like that. But you have to have a general sense of the laws that govern your cooperative. And also a big part of duty of care, in my opinion, is just reaching out to professionals when you don't know the answer or you don't have the expertise, reaching out to an attorney as an example, or your property manager and saying this situation has arisen, how, what's your legal opinion of how we should deal with it, or an accountant, anybody like that. Because again, you're not expected to know everything, but you are expected to take the care to get the information you need to make a prudent decision. And then your fiduciary responsibility is also a financial one, right? So you're responsible for making sure the business is running in a positive way financially and keeping good track of that. I think sometimes boards lose that a little bit because you do have full property management and folks who are doing the numbers for you. So it can be easy, especially if things are ticking along nicely, it can be easy to just be like, okay, everything looks fine. We have money in our bank accounts, whatever, but you do have a responsibility to keep an eye on those things. And then the duty of loyalty is, again, that setting aside your own self-interest. So that's a big reason why, for example, most boards are required to have a conflict of interest policy, not because we think that somebody is going to act in their own self-interest, but because conflicts, especially in small communities, are bound to arise, right? And we just want to have a system to deal with them. And sometimes, and I don't have to tell you all this because you all live in your co-ops, but perception can be reality in terms of what the members think is going on. If some deal seems shady, even if it's not, that would be why you have a conflict of interest policy, so you can avoid even the implication of impropriety there. And then you have to follow all applicable laws. Any thoughts about these two other examples of duty of care or duty of loyalty that anyone can think of? Or I've seen this slide where they use a cat instead of a dog on the duty of loyalty, which I think is funny because they clearly haven't met any cats. Okay, I think oh shoot, that's pretty much all the stuff I just said. Okay. Oh, so another thing is you all are part, as a cooperative, you're also bound sort of a little more loosely maybe than how you're bound to laws or bylaws or things of that nature. But there are these things called the Cooperative Values, which John has up on the screen right now. And equity, democracy, equality, self-help, solidarity, and self-responsibility are the cooperative values. Are those all of them, John? I should know that, but I don't.
Well, these are not the principles, these are the values. So the next
Right.
slide is principle. Yes, so
Right.
my understanding is these are the 6 values. I could
Okay. Yeah. And then the sort of the next layer are the cooperative principles. These are actually attached to, I believe, to the backs of all of your bylaws. So they're sort of an addendum to your bylaws. Does that sound right? Have folks seen these before? These 7 cooperative principles?
I was on a co-op board and we started each meeting with going around, and the icebreaker was, what does this value mean to you? And so one month we would do voluntary and open membership, and we'd go around and people would comment on what they thought that meant to our co-op. And then the next month we would take on another principle.
Yeah. So just something to keep in mind. There's tons and tons of literature out there if you're interested in learning or talking more about these principles or values, but they're sort of like the underpinning that ties all co-ops, be it food co-op, credit union, rural electric co-op, together, is that everybody does their best to adhere to these principles and values.
And I would lift up number 6, which is cooperation among cooperatives. So, so for instance, the tie goes to the runner. If your co-op is going to buy a lawnmower, and you can get one at the local hardware store that is a co-op. What is it? Not True Value. What's the other one? Ace, yes. Or you could get it at, and it's the same price as the one at Lowe's or Home Depot. Tie would go to Ace, because as cooperatives, we cooperate with other cooperatives.
Yeah, or like Ron, I think I remember at Lakeville, you guys opened an account with a credit union, like your local credit union, to put some of your money in, or maybe I'm making that up. Does that sound familiar? That would be another example of working with a co-op. So, oh, many hats. So when you're on the board, you have a lot of different roles, or you wear many hats. Oh, John is showing us that you guys got another handout of the hats. I won't belabor this point, I don't think, but the idea is that you juggle a lot of things when you're on the board, and it's the business side of things, the fact that you function as a landlord of all the residents. You're trying to build community and, strengthen member engagement, hopefully continuously in whatever way that looks like. You're managing all the infrastructure and making sure the physical assets remain, healthy so that you can continue to live there, and you're investing in that. And then you also have vendors that you're working with, volunteers that you're managing. So there's sort of an employer hat there that you're wearing. So there's just lots of different moving parts. And the governing documents, again, I think sometimes people think like, oh boy, the bylaws or whatever, like how cumbersome. But I hope that you can feel like they're a tool for you to use, and like I said, stand on the shoulders of others who came before you and helped you make those decisions in advance. So your bylaws govern the business, how you do business, right? Who gets to make what decisions, things of that nature. Your community rules govern the individual residents and their behaviors, how they have to keep their homes, their home sites, everything like that. And then if the bylaws are the what, like what you have to do, then the policies are the how, right? So how do we get this done? What do we do if someone isn't paying their rent? Well, we have a past due rent collection policy for that. What do we do if someone isn't following the rules, right? Things that we know, for better, for worse, are going to keep coming up over and over again, so that we don't have to sit down every board meeting and say, it happened again, somebody didn't follow this rule. You can direct your property manager or whoever to follow the laid out steps in the policy. So those are documents that are internal to your ROC that govern how you do things, how you get your work done. They're all amendable in one way or another, which you all know. So they're not set in stone, and it's up to you and more often the membership to make those changes if you see fit. And you can go to the next slide, John. And then there are documents that neither you nor I nor John have any control over that govern your community. Another handout, the fair housing handout for that. So there are federal laws like fair housing laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which includes those requests for reasonable accommodations fall under that typically, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. John and I, when we were prepping for this, we were saying we could probably do a whole hour on just those three things because they're really important and dangerous to run afoul of, I'll just say. So if you have more questions about that, do let us know. Then there's the state law in New York that governs not-for-profits, which you technically are, governs manufactured housing. So these are things that are going to designate how and when you have to do certain reporting things, like how you have to tell, don't you have to register like twice a year now, or is it still, yeah. With like the tax and finance and all those things, those are New York State type requirements, and your property manager hopefully can help you with that. And then on a local basis, you have to adhere to building codes, certain fire restrictions, occupancy standards, like Department of Health standards, if you're like, you have a septic system or a well system that you need to keep at a certain threshold. So there are lots of rules, I guess, is like the headline of this. So you can go, oh, and we're gonna do this quick. We can just do this together, John, if you can open it up and then we can run through the questions. Is it opening? Oh, it is. Wow. So if folks just wanna, you can put it in the chat or you can shout it out. We'll just go through. There's only like 7 questions. So if you want to know, if you have a question about when the annual meeting is held, where would you find that information? In your...
Expand your screen, like,
oh,
so that
yeah,
we can read that. We can't, it's too small.
Yeah, too small for my eyes.
John, can you
Sorry.
zoom in if you click? No, that's good. If you click those 3 dots in the far right, sorry, no, on your like browser, up by the X where you would close it, but then right below it, there's 3 dots. I wonder if I can, let me see what.
It's the 3
Yeah,
white
okay.
dots. Yeah,
There we go.
I got it.
Okay,
That's
Yeah,
better.
there we got it.
And then just scroll up so that we can read the questions.
yeah,
There you
There we go,
perfect.
Sorry.
So, no, thank you. So if you have a question about when an annual meeting is held, would that be, you can even hold up, let's say, 1 finger would be, you think it's in the rules, 2 is bylaws, 3 is policy and procedures. Where would you find the answer about the annual meeting? Sherry's holding up 2. 2 is right. So your annual meeting, because your annual meeting is a part of like who gets to make decisions. How do we as a corporation and as a cooperative get stuff done legally? So that's in your bylaws. Great. What if you have a question about director terms? How long are they, for example? Yep, we're going to again, right, because again, how do we make decisions? Who makes decisions on our behalf? How long are director terms? If I have a question about fences, where are we going for fence related questions? Right, 1, because that would be governing me as an individual resident. What do I get to do? How can I make my fences? If it were a question about how do I get my fence approved, that might be a policy or procedure. Yeah, exactly. If you have a question about how to process an application, somebody new wants to move in, where do you go? How do you process that application? This is kind of a hard one, I think. I've seen a 2. I'm seeing a 2 from Sherry, seeing a 3 from Ron, 3 from Doug, and a 2 from Angela. I would say you guys are in the right direction. If I were you, I would start with the bylaws just to see. Sometimes there's like big picture requirements, like I need to get back to you in a certain amount of time, or these are the things I need from a member who's moving out, right? Those might be in the bylaws. The how word in the question points me towards policy and procedures, because it's like, how am I going to process this application? We've probably laid that out in our membership application procedure document, right? Something like that. If you have a question about quiet hours in the community, rules, I think rules, yeah. If you have a question about the definition of membership, what does it mean to be a member? What do I get for it? What's the big idea with this whole membership thing? I'm gonna go 2 on that, because I think in most bylaws, there's like the very first, or it's like the second section technically. It defines what it means to be a member, how you qualify, what it means to be a member in good standing.
In a couple of the ROCs, there are rental units. And because the bylaws say a member must be an owner of a manufactured home, the people that are in the stick-built homes in those ROCs by the bylaws are not eligible to be members, interestingly enough.
Yeah, right. And that would be in the definition of membership section. How about if you have a question about occupancy limits? How many people can live in each home? That's a hard one. I agree with Ron. I think rules, normally there's something in the rules that says like 2 people per bedroom, 2 adults per bedroom or something. But if you didn't find it in the rules, where do you think you could go?
It's in the state now says that can't be limited. That's in the law.
Really? I thought that like local building codes have requirements of, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, John, we'll have to write that on our parking lot and follow up with that. Yeah.
Check that for me, would you please?
Yeah, for sure. We definitely will. If you have a question about how the process for collecting lot rent, where are you gonna go?
Ooh.
I'm gonna go 3. I'm gonna go policies and procedures. Again, if we're looking for process answers, we're probably looking at policies and procedures. Because we already know, like, if we're looking for, like, do we get to collect rent? That would be in the rules and in the bylaws, right? But the how to get it, if it's past due, would be in policy and procedure. And if you have a question about a rent differential for a non-member, so if a non-member might pay more than a member for rent. I don't think I know the answer to this one, John, actually, so I might need you to have a celebrity appearance. I think it would be in the rules.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
I think it would. Do you guys have member, non-member rent differentials? Most of you? No. Lakeville, no. No. So
Because everybody's a member.
yeah, which is the goal. So that's good. But,
Thanks.
okay.
Well, one of the things with that that might come into that is we have some snowbirds.
Oh
And
yeah.
once in a while, we'll have their kids, somebody, like if they needed a place to stay or whatever,
Right.
but the HOA is still paid monthly. There isn't any real differential. It's always paid in full.
Right. Yeah. It's more often what I've seen is for folks who like opt not to become like who have lived there for a long time since before it became a co-op, opt not to be members. It's sort of like a acknowledgement. It's like a nominal extra acknowledgement that it takes time and energy to be a member of the co-op. And so if you're going to opt out of that, then it's like, I mean, John, what is standard that you've seen, like 20, 15?
it's 25
Okay.
frequently. And the other reason it happens is because you guys live in communities where you're not tearing your hair out so much about people's violations of the rules, but in other ROCs, they are having a hard time enforcing the rules. So what happens is that they pull the membership from somebody if they have a history of being a scofflaw about the rules, and now they're effectively paying a fine.
Mhm.
The rules, and it's not a cheap fine at $25 extra a month.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting to me, because I did not realize that you could be part of the co-op without being a member.
So you aren't, so you can't
Right.
vote. You lose your membership. You are effectively
Expelled,
expelled,
basically. Yeah.
and you can still live there, but you keep violating the rules. Now you're on your way to being evicted.
I see. Okay. All right.
So it's progressive
I'm
enforcement.
looking at Doug and Angela with a thankful heart that we haven't had to deal with that. So
Good. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's also, it just gets messy in my experience. I think that's pretty much it for duty of care and loyalty and documents. So any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments?
And also neglected to show this. So you've got this, which talks about the duty of care and the duty of loyalty in your folders.
Great. Do you want to just power through?
Yeah. Yeah, we were going to do 3 and then take a break.
Okay.
How's that sound, everybody? We'll go
Yeah,
to.
we could just, I mean, if everybody's else okay. I mean, Angela's out. We're okay with running with this. It's good. It's nice.
Okay.
Let's do a bladder check at 2:45.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. And I will share my screen now. You ready, John?
Yes, so
You see it?
everybody got those tote bags and all the swag, like the mouse, all those things. They say rockusa.org, myrockusa.org. If you haven't been to that website, now you can't remember the name of the website, you can go look at your bag. So let's go to that website.
Can we just keep
Yeah,
going?
keep
Okay.
going through. All right, so once you get to rockusa.org, is everybody, well, you can sign up, and once you sign up, then you log in, you get access to the good stuff, and so all these are available. Next slide, please. Oh, we don't actually have those. Okay, let's go back one. So Paul Bradley has got some stuff up on the President's blog. There are interesting news and events from around the country. The ROC Association blog has interesting information from those folks who are board members around the country. Sherry, I think you said that you went to one of those meetings, the Better Together meetings, and those folks represent you to the ROC USA board, and they have a blog. And then if you care to find out what the ROC USA strategic plan is, it's up there. Next slide, please. Okay, Better Together community grants. The window closes July 24th. The information is on that page. And there's interesting discounts you can get. I don't know if you knew that, but you can go and you can get 10% off stuff when you buy it. And there's home improvement stuff that you can get discounted as well. And there's home financing and insurance tips, and there's community. If you're going to launch a community improvement thing, one thing you can do is go there. It's got some decent tips for how to start it, and I gave you those AARP things as well, and that's what's in there in addition. And next slide, please. There are sample newsletters in there from all over the country, and they're really good. So I recommend checking them out. I am a firm believer in newsletters because you do a lot of work, and not everybody appreciates the hard work that a board does, and it happens behind the scenes. And so you get to brag about it in a newsletter. And also, it's a great opportunity to remind people about stuff like, yeah, Meadow Valley had a situation where somebody left before they were going to sell their home and have it towed out of the community. And so they didn't give the board 30 days notice. So 30 days notice is the kind of thing you want to put in your newsletter. So, but also Meadow Valley has a wonderful newsletter. And you can, hopefully you guys can share the newsletters. So moving along, next slide, please. There's some of these have dead links. I think the working with your property manager one, the links are dead. Let's move along. Okay. So everybody got that little the management guide thumb drive. So I put a thumb drive in your bag of goodies. That has a 500-page management guide, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. And it is also, if you lose the thumb drive, it's online, and it's in that New York. It's posted there under New York. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this is outdated because there's, oh, Carol joined us. Hello, Carol.
I'm having my internet is really down.
Yeah, sounds
Having a
frustrating.
I'm having a problem with Frontier. This is since April, and just recently it's been the worst. So I apologize, but I said, let me try it. But speaking, it's like, it's not clear, but I'm here.
Okay, and we've recorded this. So if you wanted to catch the first half, you can go to YouTube. We'll send out a link to it.
Okay.
So there's 2 of the 3 directors. And the management guide has just, it's been incredible to go through and learn about all the stuff in the management guide. It's got great policies. I gave, let's see, there's like a blue, I think I put this in most people's binders, but there's like a checklist of policies. It's like a blue checklist. And if your community hasn't done something, you can check to see what are the possibilities. And, for instance, one of the communities I was working with found that people were hassling the contractors that were coming into the community, and it was driving the board crazy. And they came to find out that there's a policy template about leaving contractors alone. Those kinds of goodies are in there. So I don't want to be the scary dad here, but you have board member insurance, and so you can deal with lawsuits, but it's never good to get sued, and lawsuits are more likely to happen when you're not following the rules as they're laid out. It is so much better to be bulletproof. Next slide, please. And so, oh, there's the blue list. So let's go through these. So the table of contents shows all the various things in the management guide. And as you can see, it's got stuff on effective meetings and board policies. There's all the various policies in there, and also like budgeting things. It didn't go. You want to go to the blue one? What is that gonna? I love this thing. These are all the policies. This is the grab bag of options you have. If you don't have these in your trick bag, it's worth looking at them. Next slide, please. And we went over this a little bit. We recently got some really good information about the HOPA guidelines from HUD. So we have some information about that now, about how to report and where the feds currently are with revisiting the rules. It's actually an open window. Last year, we did a workshop on managing your property manager, and we also did an example of a property management review. And so that's up on YouTube, and we have the materials for that. And so there were 4 questions, four areas of review in 4 questions in 4 different areas, meaning 16 areas or 16 points where you can give feedback to your property manager. And it's just really important. I haven't seen any ROCs yet in New York do this. And so as your technical assistance provider, I am making the recommendation that if you're going to get your oil changed, and if you're going to make sure that your home is doesn't have any gaping holes, also you should be doing a review of your manager.
Ron, I actually sat in on that seminar last year, and it was pretty good. And while Keynote does an excellent job, I just to have that, right, they work for us. And at the end of the day, when you review people who work for you, if it's done well and done correctly, it really strengthens the relationship. So I think that might be a good thing for us to take a look at adding down the road into our process here.
And Angela, the first thing you said, I want to lift up, because doing a review, the secondary gain is that you're underlining the power dynamic. They're working for you, and just by going through this exercise, you're lifting up that power dynamic. Okay, next slide, please. And so there's stuff about being a landlord, and I've heard board members say we're not landlords. And okay, I understand why a board member of a cooperative would say we're not landlords, but yet you have landlord type responsibilities, right? So next slide, please. So this is all the things that I see all the ROCs in New York working really hard on. This is taking care of the roads and the leaks in the pipes and all that good stuff. Everybody's doing a really good job of this all around New York State. That's the property owner hat. Next slide, please. And so there's a whole chapter on that. And so I really, I recommend looking at that because it's got some great stuff. Oh, one of the things I want to lift up from the property owner chapter is, so Angela and Doug, have you seen the maintenance schedule? It's in there. So there's like, I haven't seen any ops managers around the state engage a maintenance schedule, and maybe you guys are just doing it, you know, because you're good at it and you're doing what you'd be doing. But you can put it in black and white and have your own maintenance schedule, and it's right there in the property managers, the management guide, excuse me. Next slide, please. So none of the ROCs in New York State actually have any employees, but you all hire your accountants and your attorneys. I heard actually last week that it's good to have 2 attorneys on board. Yeah, Molly's one is your attorney who's really good at evicting people, right? So, and that's an attorney who kind of specializes in going in front of a judge. That attorney might not be the best attorney to ask about corporate law and governance, right? You might want to have a separate attorney who is like really good at helping you understand if a rule or a bylaw change is going to pass muster with the Attorney General. And that just are different parts of the brain. So can anybody think of why it would be a good idea for a board? How is it that having people in your community come together would be good for you as a board member? In other words, what is your self-interest in having people in the community come together and do events, a social committee bringing people together? How does that benefit you as a board member? Awkward silence. I'll wait for you guys to.
We just had our social, it was a Hawaiian theme, and it was such a success. Speaking to residents, they want to do this like every week, exaggerating a little bit, but they just thought it was so nice. And this one gentleman introduced himself to another one and said, "Where do you live?" And it was his next door neighbor. And they didn't even know that they were neighbors, you know, who they were. So, you know, so as far as, go ahead.
That's a primary gain. That's incredible. Get to know your neighbors. But how about a secondary gain? How does that help you, Carol?
As far as the board goes, you mean?
You as a board member, what do you get out of those 2 people not knowing each other, finally getting to meet?
Well, it gives me great pleasure that now we're doing things like this. People are going to be familiar with and know their neighbors and other residents in the community.
So there's just the personal satisfaction out of it. And Sherry, you wrote for representations of the ants and needs, wants, right? Okay, so that makes your job easier to get a direct line on what people are thinking. What else? Yeah. So now it's not the open forum section of the meeting. Someone can whisper in your ear about stuff, and you can really get to see what's going on and get your finger on the pulse of the real concerns of the members of your co-op. Anything else? Well, I've got one thing, and that's emerging leaders. You know, it's great to have a farm team for new leadership. I think everybody on the call as part of their community, no, not everybody, but there's term limits are part of the ROC USA model. So eventually everybody's going to cycle off. And so who's going to come on, and how do you find those people? And so social gatherings are one way to identify people for leadership in the future, which then makes it easier for you to step off and bring on new people. So that's one other way that it can help you. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so myrocusa.org, great website. The management guide, that thumb drive. I hope I lifted out some must-see items that will lead you to dive into that if you haven't already. Any thoughts or questions about all this stuff up till now? No. Angela's shaking her head no. Anybody? No. How's everybody's bladder? Anybody? You okay? Okay. Well, then I'm hearing people say we should power through. Okay.
Okay, next is the next and the final for this session is our financial training. So called Follow the Money. But first, I just want to gauge folks' like comfortability with talking about the finances of your ROC. So I want you to put up between 1 and 5 fingers. 1 finger is like, I have no idea what's going on when we talk about the money. I don't like to talk about the money. I hate it. And 5 is like, I'm basically a CPA. I totally understand every time we talk about finances. I totally get the reports our property manager sends. I don't even need to be here. We've got a 3.
I'm not a CPA.
Okay, yeah, not
Yeah,
officially,
neither
but
am I.
okay, so I'm seeing a 4 from
Yeah.
Ron, but it might be like a 4.5 or 5. 2, 3, 4 from Carol. This is not, I'm not going to hold you to it. I just am curious, like where we're starting, because I think folks can have a lot of, we come from, especially even just the math of it. Sometimes folks have a lot of feelings about math, and then you
Angela
add
threw
the
you
money.
a 5.
Angela, you did throw me a 5, so I'm hoping maybe you can learn something, but I don't know.
She was doing
the
it like a
end.
gang sign.
She was like, I think she was sort of like ashamed that she was like, but I am here. So hopefully we can learn something. But so a big part of your fiduciary duty and your duty of care is to understand what's going on with the finances. And unfortunately, fortunately, I have worked with a lot of boards, but unfortunately, I would say some of them rely very heavily on their property manager to know what's going on with the financials. And, to a degree, like, I'm glad they have a trusting relationship with that person or firm, and that they're getting high quality information to the degree that they feel like it's in hand. But at the same time, it's not the property manager's business, right? It's your business as a board. It's your responsibility to follow the money, as this session is aptly named. And that doesn't mean you have to be super duper experts on financials or financial statements or anything like that. You've hopefully heard this spiel before. You just have to, I think one of the biggest things is being able to know where we're at, where we should be, and where we have been, right? So this is going to be like a little bit of a deeper dive into that, but not too deep, I promise. Okay, John, you can go to the next slide. So we're gonna try to demystify the corporate finances a little bit. Initially, this training had a long thing where it's like, how are your corporation's finances, your cooperative finances, similar to your personal finances? And John and I took that out because I actually think there are some ways in which they are similar, right? Like, raise your hand if you use a budget for your personal finances, like month to month or year to year, if you sort of like map out how much you're going to spend when on what. Some of us do, some of us don't, that's okay. You always have to have a budget with your cooperative. There are some similarities between your personal finances and your cooperative finances, but actually mostly I find them to be pretty dramatically different. So I thought that was an unhelpful comparison. We're going to look at basically if you only know 6 things, if you only pull 6 things out of your financial reports, what are those 6 things to pull out? We're going to take a look at that. And we're going to also look at where to find them. If your property manager uses QuickBooks, I think that's what the sample reports that we have are pulled from QuickBooks. So they're going to look really similar. If they don't, it might take a little more digging, but we'll get there. And then trending, right? So how to look at it over time, which in my opinion is the most important part. So, okay. So some of us use budgets. Okay, great. So when we're talking about financials, we're talking about the reports you get from your property manager. And generally speaking, we should every month get a balance sheet, right? So what money do we have in what accounts? A budget to actual statement for that month, right? So how are we doing this month compared to what we said we would do this month, AKA our budget? How are we doing fiscal year to date is another report, budget to actual. And then our accounts receivable. So who owes us money? How much? How old is that money they owe us? Accounts payable. Who do we owe money to? How old is that debt? Those are, and then some property managers will also supply you with a general ledger, which is just like a dump of literally every transaction that they have done on your behalf over the last month, which depending on if you're like a 1 or a 5 in that scale, could be super overwhelming and not at all helpful. Or if you know where to look for stuff, it can be useful. If you don't get a general ledger, you can always ask for that too. Great. So we're going to take a look at those 6 financial things. There are the 6 things. So if you only, and notice it says every board member. So another thing sometimes boards will do, they'll say like, oh, the treasurer, the secretary, for example, might not really know what's going on with the money, but like, isn't that the treasurer's job anyway? Like they're probably on it, right? But this does not say financial information that the treasurer should know. So just like how we talked about in the very beginning, all board members are responsible for all decisions. You can't abdicate your financial responsibility just because you're not the treasurer. So 6 things everybody should know. I would say the role of the treasurer. Do we have a treasurer here? Maybe? No, we don't. Okay. The role of the treasurer, though, and you can say this, you can quote me on this to your treasurer, is to sort of translate the financial information, be like the transmitter of these 6 things to the rest of the board, because they are going to take the time, hopefully, and put it into a format that's easily digestible to the board from that bucket of financial statements you get from your property manager. So we want to know, how much do people owe us, right? The cooperative is us. How much money is in each of our accounts? How much money do we owe other people? Are we doing better or worse than we said we would according to our budget? Are we spending more or less, or bringing in more or less so far this year or this month? And how are we doing when we break it down into categories? And then how much are we spending on our capital improvements, on making sure that our community is livable and a nice place to live? So those are the 6 things. And now we're going to look at where to find those 6 things. So question 1, how much money do people owe us? That number is in the accounts receivable. It's under assets on your balance sheet. Oh, and this is John showing us the handout. It's under assets on your balance sheet because it's technically money you've already made, right? You've earned that money. You just haven't collected that debt yet. It is past due in some regard. So we're going to want to be tracking this number. Hopefully it's at 0. That would be the perfect accounts receivable number, because it means everybody's paying you on time all the time, right? If that number is going up and up and up, we want to be having a conversation with our property manager. What are we doing to get that money that's owed to us, right? To get that back rent. So that's accounts receivable. How much money do people owe us? Then the next question I think was how much money is in all of our bank accounts? You're going to look in the same place on the balance sheet for those things. And that is that list under assets, current assets. And you all have, and John, this is a handout for you all where it lists all the bank accounts, because you normally have a checking account, right? Your operating account, the money that's pulled in and out of the most every month. Then you have a debt service reserve account, which is, I call that like your apocalypse fund. It's like your lender requires you to have a month of your mortgage payment set aside in case the world were to end. Well, I called it that before the pandemic, and now it sort of feels inappropriate to call it that, but I haven't thought of a better name. And so that they can basically, so the lender can reach in and take their mortgage payment if you have no other money in any of your other accounts. You have your replacement reserve account, which is for capital improvements that normally you have a process to request that money from your lender. So it's a lender held account. You have your tax and insurance escrow, which you pay into every month. And then your lender also pays your taxes and insurance on your behalf out of that account. And then you have your working capital account, which is more like your savings account. It's not restricted, but you do have a minimum balance you have to keep in that account. And what that minimum balance is can be found in your loan agreement. So that's how much money do we have in our account. And you can talk more in detail about the different types of accounts, because it matters if you have a ton of money in operating and none in replacement reserve or vice versa. That's going to have a different implication for your co-op. Okay, next slide. How much money do we owe other people? Do we owe to vendors, right? This is an important question because we want to be up to date on our bills, especially lots of you are sort of in smaller towns. You don't want to get a reputation locally for not being able to pay your vendors or not paying them on time. So you're going to want to track this accounts payable number. Again, just like accounts receivable, we just don't want to see it go up and up and up. Normally, there is some balance in here only because of the timing of when the bill came in and when the reports were pulled. The danger is if you see the balance of your accounts payable climbing, it could be that you're spending beyond your means and you're not actually able to cover those bills. And that's why that balance is going up. So accounts payable is another good number to track. Then we're looking at our profit and loss budget versus actual. To answer the question, are we ahead or behind so far this year? For the total, you're going to go down to just above the bottom line there to the net income. You can see it's sort of circled on this slide and in your handouts too. That's going to tell you if you have a deficit or a surplus this year, this period of time, sorry. So it's a month or it's year to date normally on your monthly statements. And here you can see we have a deficit of $860. So again, we'll talk about trending, but it's good to look at this number in context because a deficit of $860 is not great, but looking at it in the context of the last couple of months or the last year is really going to tell us, is this part of a worrisome pattern or is this a one-off, a fluke in some way? Like an example I like to use is cooperatives pay their accountant once a year, usually a pretty hefty sum to do an audit, right? And so every year, the month that the payment for the audit hits, that the invoice for the audit hits, you're going to see an impact to your actuals that month. It's going to be pretty dramatic. But in the scheme of things, we're like, okay, we budgeted for this. It's just that it wasn't actually spread out over the whole year. It was a one-time significant payment. So there we go. And then think last but not least, what are we spending to improve the community? In other words, what are we spending out of our replacement reserve or whatever our capital improvement account is called? And that would be that looking at the balance sheet, looking at that designated account. And often too, if you go into the general ledger, you can also see the breakdown of what money has come out or gone into that account. And John, I'm not so familiar now with the ROC USA new loan statements, but I believe that money would also be reflected in the loan statement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just hard to see where it is on the
Yeah.
statement, but there's an ACH pull reflected on the statement.
Okay, great. Yep. So that's another place to look for it. And because you submit also your invoices, you want to be paid out of that lender held account to ROC USA, and then it'll show up on that loan statement. So, okay, next slide. So, so we know what we're looking for, right? We're looking for at least those 6 things. But what are some red flags? So sometimes we get inaccurate statements, or if you're reviewing them with your property manager, they might say like, oh no, that's not right. I'll fix that and get back to you, right? If your reports are late, so normally most all of you in your property management contract should have a date by which you get your monthly reports, right? Because you have to have the information you need to do your work as a board. So not getting reports on time, if there's missing information, like if they don't supply you with a balance sheet or a profit and loss or something like that. If 2 reports have conflicting information, so like the accounts receivable on the balance sheet isn't the same as the accounts receivable information on the detail sheet, there would be a problem. And if there's unplanned spending on capital expenses, because again, that's a part of your budgeting process. So emergencies do happen, and of course, you know, there's nothing you can do about that, but you just want to be tracking it and making sure everything is going well there. So great, next slide. So if we have all this information, I mentioned that like numbers, in my opinion, these numbers mean nothing without context, right? So sometimes that context is comparing it to the budget. Sometimes that context is comparing it to actuals over time. It's really up to you and your treasurer and your board what the digestible form of this information is for you to look at. And John has a bunch of different, I think that's safe to say, sort of templates for treasurer's reports and trending reports, which is just that looking at it over time thing. So there's options of ways to track this information in a way that makes the most sense to the board. And I encourage you all to have that conversation with your board. This is one example, right? As you can see, there's a column for prior month, this month, prior month, 2 months prior, and then, you know, any notes that the treasurer might make on all these items, but some way to condense all the information the property manager has given you and then make it digestible for the board and make the numbers actually mean something versus just being numbers on a page. Because when I first started this work, I would look at some groups' accounts and be like, oh my gosh, they have $100,000 in their capital improvement account. Like, what could possibly be going wrong, right? That seems like a ton of money. And then someone would say to me like, well, they actually like spent 100,000 out of it last month on emergency repairs. That makes it seem, you know, the picture seems a whole lot different then. So context is everything. I'll stop saying that, but I really believe that. Okay.
But
Next.
one of the things
Yeah.
over that though that changed within the system
Yeah.
2 years ago was going from the monthly to an accrual process.
Oh.
So that was a big change for us
Hmm.
because it doesn't give you the full picture. You know, you're always behind a little bit, even though it's easier to, you know, to account for it, you know, during the year or at year end and trying to see where you are. it does make it hard within that, well, not 90-day, but a 60-day window to really pay attention to where you really are. So
Yeah.
that was a big change for us.
Yeah, and I think that that's the biggest complaint I've heard about accrual-based accounting is like, because you also track things when you accrue them, you don't actually have a sense of how much. That's why you need to be looking at the balance sheet super close, because you don't actually have a sense of like, okay, I accrued all this debt, or someone owed me all this rent money. It tells me nothing about how much I actually brought in.
Well, and
the
that's
other
one of
thing.
the things that's really important. I don't see on this report is your debt to income ratio.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. Is it not on? Yes, so your debt service coverage ratio is another big indicator that's super important, because yeah, that's like the one number that, if I could pick one number that tells you sort of gives you a picture of everything,
Exactly.
it would be that one. So, and
There's a line in the trending report for the
okay.
DSCR. So that sample trending report, I think I sent out 11/17 copies to everybody, and that's got the DSCR in there.
Yeah, and if you guys use Excel, you can use like a fancy formula where it'll calculate it for you. So that's even better. But okay, next slide, I think. So really, you should just be asking yourselves, do I have enough information and understanding of that information to fulfill my duty of care? Now that I looked at all this information, how much as a board are we tolerating budget variances, right? So going above the budget, or in other less dramatic cases, going below the budget, right? Not spending. But that could be bad. Like, say you planned all these capital improvements that you didn't do, right? That would be an example of a budget variance where you didn't spend the money, but should you maybe be making the investment, right? So what's our tolerance for variance? And what adjustments do we need to make in our next budget when we're planning our next budget based on what we've experienced this year? So you all are members of pretty established co-ops. You've had a few years of operations, and you have a general sense of how much stuff costs. But making adjustments is important on an ongoing basis.
Well, goal setting in your 1, 3, and 5-year plans are essential.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's huge too, right? Is what needs to get done now, what's emergent, what can wait a few years, what can wait 5 years or 10 years, is going to be a part of your budgeting process, especially since with your replacement reserve, you are depositing in it monthly, right? So, but some of you not a lot, like maybe $500, say, I'm not sure, I made that number up. And so when you spend 10,000 out of it, that's going to take a long time to build back up, right? So all things to think about. I guess just one thing is like, it's obvious in our personal finances that like, if I spend this dollar on this one thing, that means I can't spend it on this other thing. But sometimes when you're working with these, like, it sometimes feels like grossly inflated numbers of a multi-million-dollar business, it can feel like I heard a board member say the other day, it chilled me to my core. He said, well, there's always money. Like there's always money. If it's an emergency, there's always money. And I was like, okay. I mean, like if it's an emergency, of course you need to spend the money. Like if it's a health and safety concern, let's say, but there's not always money. Like spending the money, even on an emergency right now, means you're stealing that money from yourself on a project down the line. So I think that's an important, like, just to hold it all in your mind, which is hard. But think of it as a closed system, because it is, right? If you spend money on this thing, it means you're not spending it on this other thing. So, and then watching the trends. I'll stop saying that because I say it all the time, but watching the trends is really important, because that's giving you the context for really how worried should you be about a worrisome thing that happens. If it's just one dot on the graph, I'm not really sure, but if I can track it along with others, then I have a better sense. It's not enough to get the reports from the property manager, say, I trust that property manager, and rubber stamp those documents. The buck has to stop with the board. And And then the treasurer should, look at those trends and report to the board too. So they're the translator of that financial information. Next slide. Oh, we made it. We've arrived. Questions, comments, concerns. What treasurer's report do you think, are the treasurer's reports you're getting right now working for you and the board? Do you think there are ways they could be more robust? Are you getting a treasurer report? Some boards don't use them. Any thoughts about the numbers, the finances?
We review them every month. They're adequate.
Right.
We're good.
Good.
We're able to plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Predictability is so important too. Yeah. Carol, did you have a little? Oh, you are muted. I don't think I can.
For us here, we, the board, meet with the treasurer like a few days before we have our monthly meeting. We go over everything. And then, because we want to make sure everything is right. And Brenda has been very good with reporting, and she's right on the money with things, and with the help of John and whoever, and J&J management. And that's the way we do it. We meet before, and then, we have all that information, like you said, all the different, we have that. So I think she's doing a good job, for us,
Great.
and presenting it to the people when we have a, monthly membership meeting.
I think we're very
So-
fortunate in our situation, Ron. I mean, I think our management group does a good job of tracking, working with our treasurer,
Mhm.
and is certainly very conscientious about the work that she does. And I feel that the information that we're provided is both up to date and easily trackable.
Right.
Great.
I agree.
Great. And so, yeah, and John has lots of resources for that if you or your board is interested in digging deeper. But yeah, that's pretty much the financial piece.
So this week's modules were kind of like the critical guide rails for how to stay afloat and be bulletproof. Next time we meet, and that's August 7th. We're going to have much more interaction. There'll be some very cool scenarios. So very much applying knowledge in the next round. So I'm looking forward to that. I would say that because things are set up like we discussed in today's workshop, there have been no failures. I mean, if you look at manufactured housing communities in New York State, their communities are failing all the time. There are bankruptcies. You see things like Robert Morgan losing all his parks because of bad acting going on there. Jeff Cook is being pulled into court for Cook Properties. There's some folks having problems there. Not one of the 290 ROCs all around the United States have gone belly up. None of the co-ops have gone belly up, and they haven't gone belly up because of the guardrails that ROC USA put up, and because of the boards doing the hard work of keeping things on the guardrails. So the system's working, and kudos to you all for continuing to make that happen. Because the thing that I hear from members of ROCs that strikes me the most is the sense of security people have about, and the sense of control and the predictability of their future. I talk to members of manufactured home communities that, and there's a sense of despair for some folks because they don't know where things are heading. So let's, just, I have a deep sense of appreciation for the system and the people in place making the system work. So kudos to you all.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and we certainly thank you for your expertise and guidance, and helping us understand and navigate this. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you
we'll see
very
you
much.
in a
Sorry
month.
that I joined so late. Okay.
That's okay.
Hope
John's
my
gonna put
computer's
this on.
working better then. Bye.
Everyone take care.
You
See
too.
again.
Thanks, everybody.
So I hit pause or stop?
You hit stop, and then you have to like leave your computer open for a second while it like,
It's got a
I don't
problem.
know exactly what it does, but it has to like percolate it somehow.
I want to stop recording to the cloud. Yes. And I will get an email notification